Every human being lives inside the solitude of their own mind. We spend our lives trying to make others understand what our reality feels like from the inside. But language can describe suffering. It cannot carry suffering itself. The listener always remains safely outside that raw reality. This unchanging distance is one of the foundations of human tragedy, and the reason humanity has long desired a form of understanding deeper than language. Now we stand at the edge of a reality where that distance may be erased by technology. A neural interface allows one person to send a fragment of lived feeling directly into another mind. For those who have been doubted, ignored, or dismissed, it promises a powerful form of rescue, the ability to make their experience reach another brain as undeniable evidence. But this seemingly perfect utopia hides a serious trap. A door designed to admit compassion cannot be conveniently locked only against intrusion. The moment another person can receive your emotions, the boundary between empathy and invasion begins to distort. When society begins to demand this direct access as standard, the choice to keep your own door closed begins to look suspicious. Pain is the place where human beings most often fail one another. Throughout history, pain has always required imperfect translation. If even a fragment of that sensation could be transferred directly, the old distance between suffering and proof would disappear. The practical use of this technology would logically begin in medical settings, where language already fails. Those places would become the first frontier of shared sensation. The first outline of this direction already exists in contemporary neuroscience. In 2023, a study published in Nature decoded neural activity linked to attempted speech and converted it into text for a paralyzed patient. It translated trained brain activity related to attempted speech into clear communication. In 2014, a PLOS-1 study connected two human brains using EEG and transcranial magnetic stimulation, translating one participant's brain signal into a motor response in another person's body. In 2019, the BrainNet system connected three people through a brain interface, allowing two participants to send decisions that helped a third participant solve a task. For people who have spent years being dismissed, the transfer of experience would feel close to justice. The body would no longer need to beg language to be believed. Suffering would reach another person carrying its own undeniable neurological evidence. But the moment pain becomes transferable, it also becomes something others may claim access to. Pain is a dense web woven from specific memories, shame, environment, and the private psychological story a person has built in order to survive. To receive another person's pain is to stand near the structure of their history. If pain can be transferred, the next stage removes the process humans have always relied on: imagination. Historically, empathy has always required conscious effort. We observe another person's behavior and try to reconstruct their experience inside our own mind, while still remaining protected by a safe distance. Because that distance exists. Indifference has been able to hide behind screens, reports, and bureaucratic data. Removing that gap would force a person who harms someone else to receive the neurological reality of the suffering they created. Before direct neural transfer becomes possible, society would create an intermediate form: controlled immersive simulation facilities designed to place people closer to another life. Modern virtual reality is already used in psychological research to analyze how perspective-taking affects social behavior. But it remains an artificial doorway. It can only place a subject near an experience. A future neural system would remove that limit and force the human body to process overwhelming terror with an intensity no screen could deliver. But receiving a raw signal is structurally different from understanding the whole person. As current neuroscience shows, when a person witnesses the suffering of someone they love, specific brain regions related to the distress of pain can activate. But that does not mean they receive the exact sensory reality of the injury itself. A neural signal is always interpreted through the receiver's personal history. The exact same data stream could appear as fear in one person, anger in another, or calm curiosity in someone trained to observe suffering. Shared emotion reduces distance, but it cannot erase the fundamental difference between separate human beings. A society built on managed empathy risks confusing the intensity of emotion with understanding. When another person's grief arrives with the weight of reality, compassion can become a crushing burden. As a result, governments and corporations will inevitably learn how to select and amplify specific emotions. Power does not need to create suffering. It only needs to choose the specific trauma that serves its purpose and make that signal impossible to ignore. A technology designed to prevent the dismissal of pain could create a calculated hierarchy of suffering, transforming cruelty into something more intimate, more acceptable, and easier to disguise as understanding. The deep human desire to be understood becomes destructive the moment it turns into a social demand. Modern social media has made the inner life highly visible, but that visibility is only a carefully controlled surface of vulnerability. People select fragments of grief or recovery and publish them to receive validation, while maintaining a strict psychological boundary around the self they do not share. In a world of shared consciousness, that distinction disappears. When emotional experience can be accessed directly, society begins to confuse access with truth. A human being is larger than any single emotion they can transmit. No shared signal can carry the long history that taught the nervous system to expect danger. Yet a listener may enter one emotional room and fall into the illusion that they understand the entire structure of the person. That certainty is the exact point where being understood turns into violence. Once that access exists, keeping emotion inside begins to look like hiding the truth. Privacy starts to look like a suspicious refusal of access. The collective synchronization of multiple minds inside a single emotional space may at first seem like the complete end of human isolation. A shared neural network would make an ancient human desire literal, binding groups together through synchronized neurological reality. This kind of unity is where individual resistance begins to disappear. When the emotional momentum of the group becomes overwhelming, private hesitation and saving doubt are easily erased. A synchronized network makes inner disagreement almost indistinguishable from betrayal. The system works smoothly by making people feel the same emotional direction. Fear spreads faster than any logical argument, and anger feels completely justified when it arrives with the heat of thousands of synchronized nervous systems. The self needs a decisive delay between the group's reaction and personal judgment. It needs a moment of silence to ask whether the certainty around it is fundamentally wrong. But shared consciousness permanently removes that fragile delay. What is collective is treated as absolute truth, and what is isolated becomes the object of deep suspicion. A person who deliberately leaves the synchronized state is no longer seen as an independent thinker. They are classified as cold, defective, and disloyal to the group. The most powerful form of social control surrounds people with a closed emotional field, until thinking against the group's momentum becomes physically painful. When the inner voice that says, "This is not my feeling," is synchronized out of existence, the individual body remains, but the person inside dissolves into the collective grid. Every technological promise of shared consciousness requires a border to open. The border around personal pain, the border around individual memory, and the border around the private space where judgment begins. The self is forged in the private darkness of thoughts we never speak, contradictions we never resolve, and memories we allow to die quietly inside the body without exposing them to another mind. The right to be completely alone inside your own head is one condition that allows authentic love to exist. Without that protective distance, intimacy becomes constant inspection, empathy becomes systemic force, and belonging becomes total absorption. Shared consciousness promises to heal isolation by dismantling the walls between us. But those walls are not prisons. They form the actual shape of a person. They give the self enough darkness to think before speaking, enough distance to love without ownership, and enough silence to resist the warmth of the group. If those structural walls are destroyed, human consciousness becomes an overcrowded interior with nowhere left to retreat. The ancient dream of being fully understood reveals its final cruelty. To be completely known is to lose the small private distance from which we choose who we are. Faced with total transparency, humanity will begin to redesign the mind itself in order to survive the pain of being constantly seen. We will police our own subconscious, polish our memories, and suppress the dark roots of desire so that we always appear acceptable to others. We will destroy our true originality simply to survive inspection. The human story began with the universal wish to be understood, but as shared consciousness closes around the human mind, the final desperate prayer of humanity will become far more urgent. Please leave one place in me where you can never enter.